It's your regular edition of the Tuesday Daily Delivery Podcast. I am Michael Rand. Have to say regular because it is an unusual week, as you might have noticed. If you missed the Monday Twins Playoff Preview Special Edition podcast, please go back and listen to that sometime before 3:38 p.m. today. Maybe even pause this one and go listen to that now, because that one has a shorter shelf life. It doesn't become irrelevant once the games start, but definitely has more of a playoff preview feel to it. Good interview with Bobby Nightingale Jr. and plenty of other fun stuff, including an interview with Chris Hannell, who did that amazing documentary on the Twins' 18-game losing streak. There will be post-game podcasts with myself and Lavelle E. Neal III after each of these Twins games. Should be up pretty soon after each of those games end, so look for that today. Wednesday, Thursday, always at night. Thursday's game obviously to be announced if they need that one. Trying, of course, to break that 18-game losing streak and maybe more. This is a Twins team that, even despite their struggles early in the season, has started to play their best baseball. And if you look most places, you will see them A, slightly favored, and B, kind of getting some chatter as like a playoff dark horse team to watch. And a lot of people think they can at least advance in this series. A lot of those people are not, however, the ones who have watched them lose 18 straight playoff games. So a lot of things in play here, a lot of dynamics in play here for the Twins as they get ready to start the postseason. Today's episode will be a little bit condensed. It'll still be a full-length episode, but I'm not going to do a whole lot in the intro here because we've got tons of Viking stuff, the regular film review with Andrew Krammer, Poetry in Motion with Keith Richotte, my good friend, some Vikings haikus to help break down the Carolina game. I think what we really want to get to the heart of today is I don't think the Vikings are good enough this season. I think we've seen enough to know that they're not good enough. Are they bad enough? That is the bigger question right now. Probably not internally to the Vikings, but that is the question I have right now. Are they bad enough to affect meaningful change for next season, to chart a course, to get a high draft pick that they're probably going to need to redefine the quarterback position and go forward in 2024 and beyond? I don't think they're good enough. Are they bad enough? And those are some questions we'll start to get to as we unpack the defense and especially what happened against Carolina.
Got Andrew Krammer here. Let's review the film from Sunday's Vikings win. First win of the year, Andrew. Although, I don't know how they feel about themselves coming off of that one. They probably feel okay about how the defense performed, certainly. I don't think Kevin O'Connell can be terribly happy about how the offense looked, although they didn't run a ton of plays. The running game was better, I would say. Kirk Cousins, 2 interceptions, one of them certainly his fault, and we'll get to that in a bit. But the defense was really the story of this game and kind of how they were able to, blitz, use different mechanisms that Brian Flores wants to use, and finally had Marcus Davenport and looked like he made a pretty big difference in this game.
Yeah, he really did. And that was kind of what they've been waiting for. They've been waiting for that guy that allowed them to trust their 4-man rush and really just go out there and not have to throw 5, 6, 7 defenders at once at a quarterback. And Bryce Young was the kind of guy that he didn't really have to do that. And when they did, it worked, but it really helped for them to have Davenport because you can just tell the talent level. He's 6'6", 265 pounds. That's his listed weight. I'm sure he's more than that. He's built like, kind of a wider Danielle Hunter. He's just kind of long in that way too. And offenses have to account for him. And you could see it in the snap counts, the rotations. Hunter played less than he did the week before. It was like from 90% down to 75%. And everybody just kind of had a load taken off of them. And I think everybody played better because of that. It helped that they were playing the Panthers offensive line. If they could do that every week, it would be pretty great. But in general, you just saw the difference against the run, against the pass. Davenport made plays on both ends.
So how much, so it's kind of hard, right? When you get a guy back, but it's probably against the weakest offense you've faced so far. It's kind of hard to figure out how much of it is cause, how much of it is effect. Like, how much do you think he's that much of a disruptive force versus, hey, they were playing the Panthers, rookie quarterback who's, very talented, might have a good future in this league, but isn't quite ready for prime time yet, was shaky. And we can talk about that more in a little bit with some of the blitzes that Harrison Smith was able to pull off. But like, How much of it do you think is sustainable versus a one-off of the matchup?
Yeah, we got to go off of kind of what he looked like with New Orleans. And while the sack numbers were relatively low, he was one of their leading pressure guys. He was constantly putting pressure on the quarterback, just not finishing plays in ways that he wants to, and the ways that the Vikings want him to. And he said after the game in Charlotte, he said that I need to work on my conditioning, and I'm still trying to finish some of these plays. I can think of a couple run stops where he was the first one in the backfield to kind of alter the running back's trajectory. But Patrick Jones or DJ Wanham or somebody else finished with the play. There was one sack that he should have had. He should have had two in that game, but one of them went to Wanham because Bryce Young evaded and slipped out of his grasp. So there's still some of those elements that we saw where he's not quite finishing those plays, but he is a disruptor. And I think he will be that kind of disruptor against other offensive lines, because we've seen him do that in the past. This guy is only 27, 28 years old. He's a former first-round pick for a reason. And they just don't have that kind of talent on the line. Harrison Phillips, Dean Lowry, DJ Wanham, like I mentioned, Patrick Jones. These guys are all mid-round picks, and athletically, that's kind of who they are as well. And so when they're at their best, they're more role players than guys that you need to be your stars.
They lined a lot of those guys up sometimes, like all four of them on the field, sometimes in pass rushing situations. How that look seemed like it was helping them in some situations. Is that something we would expect to see more of, especially, with some of the success they had?
Yeah, and Davenport allows them to do that. Davenport can be an interior rusher, something he actually didn't do that much in New Orleans, but the Vikings saw that in him and have kind of moved him inside. So some of the pressures, and I think maybe the sack that he had came as an interior rusher, where he would either loop around the end on some stunts that they would run, or he would just kind of beat the guard one-on-one. He had a pretty sweet spin move on I think it was the Panthers left guard in one of those plays. So when he's in the game, it personnel-wise, it reads like this is 3-4 defensive ends, but the Vikings are kind of treating Davenport like an interior guy as much as they would a Dean Lowry at times, because they do that even in the red zone where you're worried about teams running on you on the inside. So he brings that element of versatility too, that you're not going to put Dean Lowry on the edge. You're not going to put one of these interior guys on the edge, but Wanham's that rare guy that you can really move him around and match him up anywhere. I think there was a 3rd and 22 in that game where Wanham lined up over center, Davenport lined up over center. And that's just not something you see guys outside of Zadarius Smith do in Minnesota before. Maybe
based on his success rate on Sunday, Harrison Smith should be an edge rusher. Think about that.
He did pretty well. I was surprised. This was his first game with 3 sacks, not because, he's always been racking that number up, but he's always been a pretty good blitzer, and he was under Mike Zimmer. And he was productive. He had plenty of games with 1.5 sacks, but this was his first with 2 or more. And he ends up with 3, and 2 of them coming on the last drive where Brian Flores really cranked it up. I think ESPN put the number out that the Vikings only blitzed like 30% of the time in that game. It was a season low for them. Davenport was part of it, but part of it was Bryce Young. They weren't too worried about Bryce Young beating them with his arm. This is a guy that I talked to Daniil Hunter before the game, and he said he's really young. He's still learning how to read coverages and really process things. And he's going to have to trust his arm, especially if his ankle is still injured. And he was coming off that ankle injury, and you could tell he wasn't as mobile as he was in previous games. He did pick up 1 first down with his legs on that last drive. But after that is when Brian Flores just kind of turned the heat up and said, we're not even going to give you room to run. And Harrison Smith, I believe the first of those 2 sacks, he wasn't even touched. So they duped the protection, and he was allowed to kind of, go up at the line and toy with them and drop back or rush forward. He had a great game.
He did. And obviously the first of those sacks, I believe, was the sack where he jarred the ball loose. Wanham scoops and scores. And that completely changes the game because it's 13-7 Panthers at that point, and they're in Vikings territory, maybe looking to go up 2 scores. And so that obviously changed the trajectory of that game. To that point, though, I think Patrick Mahomes might be in a better position to handle those things better than Bryce Young. So is this kind of mix and match? Is this Harrison Smith? Is this sustainable, or how do they kind of find the right elements of this when they do face better competition and more seasoned competition?
Yeah, they can't waste opportunities. Like we forget the Vikings probably should have had 2 defensive touchdowns because DJ Wanham dropped an interception that Bryce Young just gifted him on a screen pass there in the red zone, and the Panthers got 3 points off that drive. You can't waste opportunities against a team like the Chiefs, and I know the Chiefs aren't playing like world beaters right now. They just eked out a win against the Jets. They obviously lost against the Lions when they didn't have Kelsey or Chris Jones, but this Vikings team is not playing well enough, and frankly probably isn't talented enough, especially on defense, to contend with a team like Kansas City. Just go through the list of things that they did, the Vikings did against the Panthers that get you beat most times. The 2 interceptions, the dropped interception by Wanham that I mentioned, the botched snap at the goal line by Kirk, the Josh Oliver flag that negates the initial touchdown before the pick six.
Right.
That was aimed at KJ. And then obviously Cousins not playing well, multiple misfires in that decision on that first interception. I really think that this team was sloppy on Sunday, and they just escaped with a close win because the Panthers are a lot worse. So to answer your question, no, I don't think it's going to be too sustainable against Patrick Mahomes or a Justin Herbert like we saw, or against a pick your poison offense in Philadelphia, where the Vikings sold out to stop Jalen Hurts and really let DeAndre Swift run wild. It's going to be tough sledding all year for the Vikings, even with Davenport, because 2 difference makers like we saw last year with Za'Darius and Daniil sometimes is not enough.
I want to get to that Kirk pick 6 before we go, but I just want to pick your brain on, I was surprised, I'm sure you were too. It was the same starting 5 on the offensive line, and they did okay. I thought obviously Ingram took blame for that second interception where Kirk's arm gets hit and they lose a chance to score there. But they ran the ball reasonably well. I thought Kirk had a pretty clean pocket most of the day, but I was surprised that they didn't get Reisner in, or whether there weren't any other moves in this game.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. And I do wonder I don't think Kevin O'Connell was asked about it after the game. I wasn't at the press conference, but I do wonder if they were going off of kind of a hot hand approach. Like, we're just going to go in and see how Ed Ingram plays. And if he's worth pulling at some point, we'll do that. Obviously, in the second quarter, they decided not to do that when he gets beat on that big play that leads to the pop fly interception from Kirk in the second quarter. I thought there were multiple moments where they could have made that decision, though, including then in the second quarter. There was a run. I mean, Cam Akers came into the game top of the second quarter, and one of his first runs was a 6-yarder, and Ed Ingram just whiffs on his block, and Akers has to pick up half of those 6 yards after contact. It's stuff like that you just see kind of way too much. And maybe they just, for whatever reason, they just didn't want to pull that trigger with Reisner. And hey, we can't see practices. The Vikings do not, nor do any NFL team, open regular season practices. So maybe Reisner's not what they expected. I don't know. We need to see him in a game, the public does, before we can really know what we're judging here in terms of their decision, and they need to speak on it because, yeah, it's not like Ed Ingram did a whole lot to really hold on to that job on Sunday.
Well, and all the PFF numbers before, I mean, Reisner's a better pass blocker generally than a run blocker, so there could be something to that as well. On the pick 6, Kirk did feel some pressure, I think, at some point. I think it was like maybe a corner blitz, but I want to play his explanation right now because I'm still trying to sort through it in my head.
I think it's a touchdown to KJ if I'm faster. I think it's a touchdown to TJ if I let the safety jump the flat. I saw the safety put hands on TJ, so I'm thinking, all right, I get to the flat. Well, I'm late to the flat now, so the safety can cover both. If I just let him make his decision, work off him, I think we have a touchdown to one of those two. I just got to be quicker to the flat or wait a tick for TJ.
Okay, Andrew, to me, it just sounds like he made a bad throw, but now he's trying to parse what he should have done, and he's kind of got this film review in his head already where he's replaying it, and I get it. That's kind of how he processes it, but that's just not a throw you can make.
No, it's really not. And it's such a late decision too. It's one that you saw Bryce Young make in terms of just throughout his young career, 3 starts so far. You see younger quarterbacks and more inexperienced guys make that kind of mistake. And I just thought in general, Kirk looked a little off on the day. There were some throws to Justin Jefferson that were too high. There were some other decisions that seemed late. One pass to Jordan Addison I can think of that arrived late and got deflected. And I just thought in general, he didn't look comfortable, even though he only took 4 hits. The pressure didn't seem overwhelming for the most part. And it was such a small sample size. He only attempted 19 passes. They only had 44 plays. The offense went 3 and out twice. They had 2 turnovers. So their time of possession wasn't going to be great. And then a defensive score obviously keeps the other team on the field. But Kirk's got to be better, and they've got weapons for him to be better. And there were times where he had open guys as well, and you're questioning what he's doing in there. And so I just think in general, that decision on the pick 6, it's such a brutal spot. And frankly, if you look at all 3 of their red zone turnovers, including that one, it's only 3, right? It's not 4. I'm not missing one.
Yes, but it's 3 interceptions at least. I can't remember if one of the fumbles was down there, but it's basically like all 3 interceptions have been like the defensive player caught the ball at like the 1 yard line.
And one was KJ kind of getting the ball ripped out of his hands. The other was TJ straight up bobbling it into the interception. So this was the one that you could totally blame on Kirk and look at him and say, hey, you can't make that decision as the veteran and leader of this team. Yeah,
that's absolutely true. And it's surprising that they won. It wasn't the worst he's ever played because he still had 2 touchdown passes and made some plays, enough plays for them to win. But they don't usually win the bad or mediocre Kirk games.
No, they don't. It took a defensive touchdown. It really did. Like I said, they should have had 2 if Wanham would have held on to that 1 interception with nobody around him on like 80 yards to go. Maybe he would have outran everybody. You usually don't escape with that kind of a win, but it takes a Carolina Panthers team. It takes a team that does not have a Justin Herbert on the other side, because there are plenty of talented but flawed teams in the NFL. Right now, the Panthers are neither. Right now, the Panthers they're both flawed and untalented. So I think that's why they were able to escape with that win. The Panthers scored what? How many points on offense?
6. Yeah, 6.
So you outscored them 14-6 or whatever in between the offenses. And that was on a day where the offense for the Vikings was not very great.
Didn't feel like there was a ton to build on necessarily. I think they can say they did good things, especially on defense in this game, but it wasn't like one of those games where you're like, okay, not only did they win, but now we see the formula or the path forward. It just felt like they got one. Can they get more? I don't know.
Well, we know this passing game can be prolific. So looking forward, I liked what I saw from Cam Akers. It was only 14 snaps. It was 7 touches for 51 yards. They didn't do a whole lot of wild stuff with him. He was in the backfield most of the time. But what he did was he was quick, decisive. He looked like he was comfortable with what he was asked to do. And he fought through contact and picked up yards. And he's quicker than Alexander Mattison. And I think you need that right now behind an interior line that's not setting up these wide kind of runways for you to get your speed going. He's got more of that acceleration. He's getting to the line of scrimmage quicker than Madison is on some of his handoffs. And I think that might be the thing you can build upon, is that if you can find some confidence in some run calls that work, if you're Kevin O'Connell, you might have some balance for yourself to get Kirk comfortable in some of these games and not say, all right, Kirk, our first 15 scripted plays are all going to be you.
That's true. That's a good point. Well, we'll see how it works for them against the Chiefs on Sunday. We'll see if Taylor Swift decides to show up. A lot of questions, what have yous for next week. Andrew, appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Like Andrew and I talked about, I don't think you can have a more dramatic kind of dichotomy between quarterbacks when you go from a rookie like Bryce Young to a MVP Super Bowl winning veteran like Patrick Mahomes. So can the Vikings defense that looked much better against Carolina, can they continue to bring the heat to kind of mix and match, get pressure? I know Marcus Davenport did help against Carolina. Can he be a difference maker? That's what we're watching for on Sunday. Otherwise, the Vikings are going to be 1-4, and a lot of the same questions we had when they were 0-3 will be resurfacing at that moment.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
It's poetry time on Daily Delivery with my very good friend Keith Richotte. Whether that Vikings game deserves it or not, Keith, you have chosen to express yourself in poetic fashion once again, haven't you?
It's the only way to talk about football.
It's the best way to talk about football. I think all football commercials, in fact,
No. I said it is the only way to talk about football.
My fault. Not best, only. Best and only. Best and only. Sir, would you like to give your first Vaiku, please?
I like my new way of watching NFL games. What a worthless slog.
So you got to watch this one. You're in North Carolina. We've talked about that a lot. In fact, we probably talked about it more a couple of weeks ago when I was there for the Gopher game and we watched a lot of football. Not the Vikings that week because they played on Thursday night that week, but you were able to watch this one because this was your home market, I suppose, when they played in Carolina. It was a fast game. It was like 2.5 hours. I don't know what you want, but you like your 45-minute games.
It was terrible. Right. It wasn't the home market. So I got to sit and watch this thing. And of course, as we've talked about before, I'm a single dad. I got a 7-year-old son. Right. So my son, of course, is still at an age where not enthusiastic about sitting down for 3 hours to watch a football game.
No.
He loves sports. We go to sports all the time. Right. But he's 7. He just doesn't have the. So, he's like, hey, Dad, can we go outside? Hey, Dad, can we do this? And I'm like, son, no, I have to sit here for 3 hours and watch this team that I hate make me feel bad about myself. You don't understand, son. I cannot spend quality time with you because I have to sit here until my butt turns numb watching one of the least inspiring games I've seen in quite some time for the full span of 3 or so hours.
And I didn't, I don't want to spoil future Vaikus, but that was not a great game to have to wait. Like say it was last year's Buffalo Bills game or something, and it was like all this drama in it. Then maybe you would want to devote that time to it. But this was not a particularly good game between 2-0-3 teams.
There was nothing fun about this game whatsoever.
Especially because you wanted them to lose, which I imagine is probably the subject of a future Vaiku. So anyway, Vaiku 2, please.
Mediocrity is within the Vikings' reach with this victory.
So you're worried now that they got to win, and you look at their future schedule, and you're like, oh man, they get to play the Bears twice. They've got a bunch of other kind of crummy teams on their schedule. I think they have Denver at some point. Maybe they get to play, some not so great teams. Your worry now is that they're not going to be like historically bad. They're going to be like 7-10 bad. Is that right?
Look, man, you're the one who said it. You're the one who said it last week. You said it before. It's like, all we want is clarity.
I agree.
All we want is clarity.
But you're all in on the tank. You're all in on the tank, though.
Well, I'm all in for one season of everything going wrong in a year where that would be the best thing to happen to this team. Okay. But with the way that it's going, it's going to be another 6 to 9 wins, maybe. And we're going to be doing the same thing over and over again. And the other part about it that just drives me insane, right, is you think about what next year could look like. And it is really, really hard, I would say even impossible, to imagine that the team gets any better, right?
Yes.
Because this has to be the last year of Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
Everything suggests that this is the last year he'll be playing for this team. And he's got his flaws, and we'll maybe get into that in just a little bit here. But he's still a very good quarterback, and you're not going to have that same level of play unless you get one of these potentially generational talents. And they're not going to do it because they're not as bad as the Panthers, even though they tried their best to lose this game.
Yeah, and they're definitely not as bad as the Bears, or at least I don't think they are, and I don't think they're as bad as the Broncos. I think, like, you're right. The best case scenario, even if they're bad this year, is probably that they're like picking 9th or 10th, not 1st or 2nd. And again, if I had a choice between 7 and 10 and 2 and 15, I would take 2 and 15. Most years, I don't think I would, because I'd say, you know what? Then you're bottoming out, and you don't know when you're going to get even back up to 7 and 10 at that point. But this is a year where, yes, you do want clarity, and I feel like we have clarity on how good they are, which is not that good, but I don't think we have clarity yet. I'm worried, like you are, that the record will become muddled because there's enough winnable games on this schedule to not do that. Okay, Vaiku 3, please.
Losing is bitter in this very unique year. Thanks for trying, Kirk.
Yeah, you on the text chain on Sunday, you did give Kirk kudos for that pick six. That pick six was a real good try. If he's trying to hasten the tank, if he's trying to hasten his ticket out of Minnesota, which I don't think he is, but if he's trying or not, that was the kind of 14-point swing, because they had a touchdown 2 plays earlier or something, but they got called back by the penalty. And then you're thinking, okay, they're still going to score, and then it goes the other way. That's the kind of game-changing play that can lose you a game, even against a bad team playing a not ready for primetime rookie quarterback. But yet they still couldn't get it done.
No, they couldn't. And Kirk, we've seen it. What is this? His 5th year, 6th year? I don't remember.
6th year here.
It's his 6th year. So we've seen a half a decade worth of what happens every single time. That he is a very good quarterback, and there's no denying that. But he's going to give you a handful of stinkers every year.
Yes.
And this was the one, right? This is the one where he gave you the stinker, where you really needed it to bottom out the stupid season, and the team managed to not follow through on the promise that Kirk Cousins gave them with the stinker that he gives you a handful of times each season. I'm frustrated, right? I'm frustrated that this team couldn't do what is in the best interests of this team, because they were playing a team that was somehow even worse than what they are right now. And they are not a good football team right now.
No, and usually they lose, to your point, they usually lose the bad Kirk games because their defense, I can't remember the last time their defense won them a game, which it did in this case, instead of merely keeping them from totally collapsing. The defense has had its moments over the years, like even the last 3 or 4 years where they've been bad, but I can't remember the last time that the defense outright won them a game before Sunday. So sorry.
But did the defense win them that game, or did the quarterback?
I mean, it was the quarterback, but I mean, the defense only gave up 6 points in large part because the quarterback was overmatched. But like for them to overcome a bad Kirk game requires some special ingredients, and in this case, it was all those external factors of their quarterback, their bad offense, and their defense, making the plays it had to. Okay, Vaiku 4, please, sir.
All it takes to win is an overmatched QB. Next week should be fine.
Yeah. You don't think that the blitzes that Brian Flores dialed up against Bryce Young will have the same net effect against Patrick Mahomes? Is that what you're saying?
I think it's possible that Patrick Mahomes might be able to handle the situation a little bit better than Bryce Young. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's
possible. Perhaps we could get Taylor Swift quarterback, since that's the only thing we can talk about in sports nowadays. Right?
Maybe she's
behind center.
Maybe she'll be here next weekend. I don't know, but
I am giddy with anticipation. I just can't wait to find out. That is definitely the thing I want to hear about on ESPN as much as possible. That is really the subject of my concern.
Seems like maybe you're not a Swiftie.
Well, not really, I guess.
Not really a Swiftie. I think her music is I like some of her songs. I'll say that. But
I'm not going to look, nothing about her or her music or anything like that. Right. And I get it. She's probably the most famous person in the world right now. But I kind of sort of watch sports so that I don't have to pay attention to any of the rest of that.
Right.
And it's just sort of frustrating. Just like, I don't care. I just don't care who's going to this game.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, Patrick Mahomes.
He'll probably be okay against that defense because Baker Mayfield did okay against it. Jalen Hurts did okay against it. Justin Herbert did quite well against it. There are better quarterbacks on the future schedule than the one they played on Sunday. But, that is also, though, if we may finish here, like, that is a bit of a, I don't know, cautionary tale is right. But to your point earlier about the quarterbacking is not going to be better next year immediately, like, this is the reality. Even if you have the number one overall pick, like, it takes a long time, usually. Even the best of the best, even Peyton Manning wasn't very good as a rookie before he became great. Like, it takes a while, even if you have this like franchise quarterback, for him to play at that level. Now, so even if they did get this, like the quarterbacking next year, I don't think it can be, I'd be hard pressed to imagine it being better. So you're right. Imagine this team with a worse quarterback. 2024 doesn't sound like a whole lot of fun. Maybe 2025 is the vision we have to have.
Would you rather be stuck where they are right now?
No, I wouldn't. I'm just saying, like, if you're in it, which I am, if you're in it, you got to recognize that it's going to be a process, that next year's not going to be much fun.
Well, at least we'll always have poetry.
Listen, I'm not all in on tank mode. I don't like the idea of tanking, losing on purpose. I will say this, though, like we've talked about, like we just brought up with Keith, I do want to see some clarity from this season. I don't want them to be stuck in mediocrity, the Vikings this year. That's all I want from a lot of the teams in this market, some clarity. What are you? What is the plan going forward? And it's harder to discern your plan when you are right around 500. Not bad enough to be truly bad, not good enough to be truly good. I feel like that's where a lot of the teams in our market right now reside, and I don't want that for the Vikings. Let us finish with the cooler on a more personal note. Excellent column today by Chip Scoggins from the Star Tribune on our former colleague Chris Snow. Passed away recently at the age of 42, complications from ALS. I got to know Chris when he was brand new at the Star Tribune. Chip does a great job kind of outlining just what a special talent he is. He came in 2003, just 22 years old, and really took the Wild beat by storm. I had actually applied for that beat when Chris got it. I was not ready at that point, even though I was probably 4 years older than Chris. He got that job, kind of put me on a different path in my career that I couldn't be happier that I got. And he was a tremendous success right off the bat. I've thought about him numerous times since learning of his diagnosis 4 years ago. What a fight he put up, what a life he lived, what a special person he was. So please go read that column from Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com, and remember to cherish every minute you have in this life. That will do it for today. Like I said, lots of Twin stuff coming up here the rest of the week, plus our usual content. There'll be 2 shows a day here for at least a few days. If the Twins advance in the playoffs, which, like I said, a lot of people expect them to do, we'll do this in the division round as well, and as long as we need to go. Until then, until tonight, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again later on.